Hello everyone, good morning and welcome to the next lecture of a topic that we were discussing, that is coronavirus under the serious basics of biology. See, in past lectures, if I say, we have discussed multiple viruses, and the recent lecture that we have discussed was regarding coronavirus, where we had established the understanding, basic understanding of what is actually coronavirus, what are the members or what are the genera that represent this particular coronavirus, and what is the structure of this generalized structure, generalized genome. We had started the replication mode. We have understood how this virus is, how the group of viruses which comes under the umbrella of coronavirus, how they maintain their tissue specificity. So, before directly diving and connecting into the topic, let us decide first of all what we are getting out of this particular lecture. And in terms of getting out and as an outcome, this particular lecture, along with the previous lecture, aimed aimed just to have a clear-cut understanding of Picona viridae family, how that particular members of the family that we talk about, the polioviruses and the rhinoviruses, how they manage to go about and bring up their life cycle. So in that scenario, we had already understood that Picona virus is among the multiple virus families. It's a very small virus. What we're talking about, the Picona viridae. That's why the name came as Picorna, P for plus RNA strength and viruses. Okay, so we already know that, and we already understood the nomenclature of picornavirus. I can call it as picoRNA virus also, or positive sense icosahedral RNA genome, which is of about 7.1 to 8.2 kilobase pairs. That's what we understood, and we also had an understanding. See, these slides are just added, to provide the connecting link from the previous lecture. When you are going for a continuation lecture, there should be a certain preamble, like what we had discussed in the last lecture, so that you should be able to connect from the previous lecture and should be bringing all the information what you had learned in the last lecture to this particular lecture and try to understand what happens next. So just to brush up, we clearly established that how this RNA molecule is released inside the cytoplasm guided by this particular VPG protein, and how the conformational changes are happening in VP4 once there is a binding of a receptor. Once the receptor is binding to this particular uh, virus. Now, after attaching and uncoating, when the release has happened, the next part was to discuss the replication part. And the replication part, is the gist of today's lecture, along with the pathogenesis that we will discuss in the later slide. So when we are talking about the VPG protein, it's a very small protein. It's a very small protein of roughly around 22, made up of 22 amino acids if we talk about in composition terms. So this is the VPG protein which is present at the 5' end, which is bounded with the phosphate group along with the phosphodiester bond. So this phosphate group is of uridyl, the U residue, or the uridine tyrosine bond that is formed. The tyrosine of the protein is forming a bond, phosphodiester bond, with the uridyl residue that is present in this particular genomic RNA at the 5' end. And when the entry has happened inside the cytoplasm, the host enzyme is responsible for cleaving this particular VPG protein attachment, cleaving this phosphodiester bond. Thereby, now a positive mRNA is free to go for its polypeptide expression. Now it is free to go for its polypeptide expression. So see, that mature mRNA, which will replicate and which is going for translation for early phase proteins, is actually free of 5. Is free at the 5' end. There is no VPG protein that is present. But when the packaging is going to happen at the later phase of this particular mRNA, then again the genomic content will be established once this VPG has again regained its place at 5' end, and then only the complete mature particle is released. So the transient step in between, this particular dissociation is required. This particular dissociation. So when we are talking about the replication, we should be able to understand that if this is the mRNA, that's what we are talking about with the poly A tail and the 5' VPG, there is IRES, internal ribosome entry site, which is required for and binding to the ribosome in order to produce a polypeptide chain. Now, when we are talking about a polypeptide chain, a nascent polypeptide, see, it contains multiple genes which code for multiple proteins. So this complete polypeptide chain has to be cleaved so that the functional proteins can be formed, and that is a function of protease. The 3C Pro. The 3C Pro is acting as a viral protease, which will cleave the polypeptide into the respective proteins. And broadly, if you want to categorize the complete proteins, you can categorize into two halves. See, VP4231, these are what? These are structural proteins which will be responsible for making the capsid, whereas P2 and 3 are the non-structural proteins. These are involved in complete life cycle. These are involved in suppressing the immune response. These are involved in inhibiting the antiviral state, as well as involved in the replication process as RNA-dependent RNA polymerase or as protease. And also, this P3 region codes for VPG protein, so it's a viral protein which will be translated and which will combine to the mature mRNA once it starts replicating. So what we see, the P1 is the structural part, P2 and P3 both are non-structural, out of which P2 is exclusively as a regulatory element, whereas the P3 are the functional proteins that are carrying out the growth-related aspects of this particular peptide. So the complete peptide goes for proteolytic cleavage under the influence of 3C, which is actually a protease. So when we say that actual cleavage is happening, what are the sites of cleavage? So here we are showing the sites of the cleavage that happens after transcription process is happening, and that is a function of the protease. So the virus is having two proteases, the 3C and the 2A. The 2A also acts as a protease, and the 3C also acts as a protease. So the complete genome of the poliovirus is having a single open reading frame, and this single open reading frame translates into a single polypeptide chain of 247 kilodalton, upon or after processing by the protease leads to different proteins, leads to different functional proteins. So the first cleavage that happens, is catalyzed by the APRO 2A proteases at this particular position, separating the structural with the non-structural part, separating the substructural and the non-structural part. And the second step is to process the complete non-capsid or the non-structural precursors catalyzed by the 3C protease. So the first proteolytic cleavage is performed by the 2A protein. And this is how the complete proteins are separated, and this is the slide that tells you all about the proteins that are formed by this particular poliovirus genome. Every protein's function has been depicted here. These are the capsid proteins. Fine. The VP1. What was VP1? VP1 was present on the capsid, which is actually the receptor binding protein, which will bind to a specific receptor. We have the 2 and 3, which are again at the capsid, and these proteins collectively are responsible for binding to the receptor. The 4 was present on the internal part, which was responsible. The change in the conformation of this VP4 was responsible for uncoating. Whereas we have 2A as protease, 2B increases the membrane permeability, whereas 2C is actually responsible to inhibit the secretory path of the cellular cell, the secretory path that is from endoplasmic reticulum to Golgi body to outside. Why? Because the replication is happening on endoplasmic reticulum. If secretory path is right, then correct. If it's not inhibited, then the virus particle may be secreted out. And then the growth or the replication protein. What replication protein? The 3C is the 3C is actually the protease. It's actually the protease which is required by the virus to form the proteins, and also this 3C protein is responsible for inhibiting the host cell transcription process. Then we have 3B, which is actually the VPG protein. Then we have 3A. This 3A is again inhibits the intercellular transport, and 3D is the main RNA-dependent RNA polymerase. Now, uniquely, when we are talking about 3B, now this 3B is what? This 3B is VPG protein, but it also acts as a primer that is required for RNA multiplication. You see, this virus is self-sufficient. It can sufficiently inhibit the host response. It can sufficiently hijack the host machinery, and it contains all the attributes that it requires for itself to carry out the functions. It's just that the raw material for making the RNA, that is AUGC, is being utilized, and the metabolic energy is being utilized from the host. So that is the beauty of this particular virus. So when we are talking about the RNA replication, in this particular replication, what are the things that are required? We require a primer that is provided by VPG. We require a polymerase that is required by 3D. We require 2B and 2C for viral RNA synthesis. We require cofactors, and now those factors that are required for initiating the transcription are provided by the host. And where this Where the complete replication is happening, it is happening on the host membrane, under the host membrane, on endoplasmic reticulum membrane. The protein synthesis is happening at endoplasmic reticulum membrane. So when we are talking about the polymerase complex, what it is doing, it is making a complementary RNA. From a plus sense, it is making a negative sense. And then again, this negative sense is used as a template to make the multiple copies of viral genomic RNA. So what exactly it is doing? The polymerase makes around 5 to 10% of the complementary negative strand, and then utilizing that 5 to 10% complementary RNA, it makes multiple copies of viral RNA, multiple copies of viral RNA, that is plus sense strand, that is plus sense strand. So when we are talking about, then most of the early viral RNA that is being formed, that early viral RNA is utilized to form the proteins, because eventually the stoichiometry has to be maintained and the packaging has to be performed. So the early mRNAs that are being synthesized by the this RNA-dependent RNA polymerase, they never go for attachment of VPG. Why? Because once you attach with VPG, you cannot go for processing, that is called as translation, process of translation. So the VPG attachment majorly occurs at the late phases, when the packaging is about to start. When the packaging is about to start, then that is the temporal regulation that is provided, that is happening in this particular virus part. So when the infection has occurred, so after say 3 or 4 hours, the peak of translation is seen. The peak of translation is seen. And what do you mean the peak of translation? What is translation? See, ribosome is binding via internal ribosome entry site, and they have started synthesizing the polypeptide. And as soon as the polypeptide starts, the protease starts acting, and they release all the different proteins. So you see, that's how the complete protein synthesis at the early phase is happening. At the early phase is happening. So once we have established that yes, viruses gain the entry and the RNA-dependent RNA polymerase has synthesized multiple mRNA strands, that is plus sense mRNA strand, and those strands have been used to synthesize the proteins. Next is what? Next is maturation and packaging. Now the virus particles should package accurately, and then it should be released from the cell. It should be released from the cell. So when we are talking about the translation part of this particular Picornaviridae family, now this particular translation is cap dependent. The picornavirus translation is always cap dependent. Now, see, I'm talking about currently picornaviridae. I have not said that poliovirus uses the cap mechanism. No, we have other genera also in picornaviridae which are using the cap, which is present at the 5 prime end, So when we are saying the cap molecule, you have to clearly understand that in host eukaryotic chromosome, please have a clear understanding. In host mRNA, there is a 5 prime cap that can be utilized for the translation process. But when we are talking about picornaviridae, the cap which is present at the 5 prime in the other genera, and the VPG which is present in the 5 prime, those proteins are not required for translation. So this particular translation process of picornaviridae is cap independent, and by cap I mean the other genera, that cap is not required. And in poliovirus, the presence of VPG is also not required for this particular translation process to happen. The genome of the RNA virus, as we have seen, contains the UTR region, the untranslated region, which is extending up to 743 nucleotides, which is present upstream to the starting codon, the AUG. That particular UTR is containing a binding site called as IRES. This IRES is called as internal ribosomal entry site. It is present in very high secondary structures, and the UTR leader sequence that mediates the binding of this viral RNA to the host 40S ribosome is mediated by this particular IRES. And in fact, this particular IRES sequence, internal ribosomal site present on the viral protein, it invites and is responsible for the proper assembly of all the initiation factors of eukaryotic initiation factors that are actually required to promote the translation process, the likes of 4 family, initiation factor 4A family, and the initiation factor 3 that is required for proper binding of 40S ribosome. Apart from the initiation factor and IRES, there is another X factor, that is factor X, that is also required, which is provided by the host, in order to promote the translation of this particular coronavirus family. So you see, there is a coordinated effort that is being generated, and the majority of the machinery that the virus is able to hijack from the host in order to initiate the translation. So the connected link, that link is provided by the untranslated region, specifically by the IRES sequence, specifically by this particular IRES sequence. Now, when I told you that there is a separate factor X that is required in order to initiate the translation, what is that factor X? That factor X is actually 180 nucleotide protein. It's a 180 nucleotide protein that is required, which is required to bind at the 5' end of the plus sense RNA. 5' end at the plus sense RNA. So when we are talking about the 5' end of the plus sense RNA, we are talking about the different loops that is being formed. So the viral protein, the 3CD protein, and the host cellular protein that we call this as poly-RC binding protein, they both interact with the different loop of this particular clover leaf model, or the representation that we have shown here, the clover leaf. This interaction will bring the 5' end closer to the 3' end, and particular point, the VPG which was produced by the viral protein can act as primer to synthesize a complementary strand. And my friends, that is the reason that formation of this ribonucleoprotein complex, the protein binding to the RNA, is very much required for the synthesis of plus RNA and minus RNA strand by RNA dependent RNA polymerase. Why? Because it has to bring these two ends closer in order to bind the VPG, which can serve as the primer, and that is how the beautiful organization of this particular Picornaviridi family is happening, and it's going about this translation process. So see, once the translation is completed, after translation, when the first protease, that is 2A-Pro, has released the non-structural and structural part. So when we're talking about the structural part, how it folds, how it starts forming the capsid molecule, that we saw that the structure is made up of 60 capsomeres which are arranged in 12 pentons, right? So how it happens? Once the polypeptide is released, the structural polypeptide that contains 4231, they start folding. Now how they fold? The assembly takes up the folding process in such a manner, that first of all, the first polypeptide, the T1 peptide, it starts folding and is cleaved by the proteases, so that they can attach in a manner of forming the outer layer of 1, 2, 3 and the inner layer of 4. Now, when the assembling is starting, they assemble themselves into a 14S complex. Now, this 14S complex is what? This 14S complex is what we are talking about, the Sitwag unit. Now, each capsomere once formed, once this triangle portion of the capsomere is formed, this is called as 5S unit. And multiple 5S units are arranging by themselves. 5 different 5S units will be arranging themselves to give rise to individual 14S capsid pentameres. And this capsid pentameres, 5 units of each penton, 12 such units will be combining to give rise to a complete capsid, And this capsid, only capsid, now currently it is empty. This capsid is called as 75S. Now, what will happen? This particular capsid will start taking the mRNA. The mRNA will be captured by this particular virion molecule or the capsid molecule. Then once it matures out, it forms a non-infectious 150S RNA, non-infectious 150S Picornaviridi, or the poliovirus that is formed. Then it becomes infectious. So you see, that is how the complete arrangement of structural protein is happening once the polypeptide is released. Then the folding starts. The folding leads to the formation of a 5S unit, and the chain which is linking all these units in the form of loop is cleaved up by the 3C protease, so that the individual proteins can now interact. to give rise to 5s unit. And now each 5s unit will be combining to form a penton. The pentamere, the 5 units will become 5 units of 5s will be combining to form penton, and 12 such pentons will be combining to form 60 capsomere containing capsid, which is actually the size of 75s. And then it will acquire the RNA particle as genome, along with the VPG protein, and that particular VPG containing poly-A-tail containing plus sense RNA will be taken up by the viral particle to give taken up the capsid molecule to give you a non-infectious picornavirion, which eventually be converted into infectious virion. Infectious virion, and the size will be 150s. The size will be 150s. Now, this particular provirion is converted into infectious part by what? See, there is a complex called as VP40. The VP40 is the accumulation of VP2 and VP4. Till now, there is no proteolytic cleavage of these two proteins. It is intact here also. So once this particular provirion is formed as non-infectious agent, then what happens? There is an internal cleavage of this VPO molecule, which release the association between VP2 and VP4, and this, dear students, marks the conversion of non-infectious to infectious poliovirus. This particular cleavage gives you a mature particle. And so, overall, if you summarize the poliovirus life cycle in different steps, what is happening? I have just given you the number nomenclature. So, what is happening? One is attachment. Second is the release of uncoating. Third is the attachment of the ribosome to this plus mRNA, and the release of VPG. Then a polypeptide is formed. And simultaneously, the principal strand has now gone to the nucleus. Now, once this particular polypeptide is formed, then there is a cleavage. The non-structural portion, the non-structural protein will be going, the RNA-dependent polymerase will be going and starting its function inside the nucleus, giving rise to 10% of the negative complementary RNA. And this complementary RNA will be further used to generate 90% of the majority copies of the plus M RNA. And again, this plus M RNA will be used initially early mRNAs are used to substantiate the amount of the proteins that are required for packaging. Once this structural polypeptide is formed, then the cleavage happens, and we saw in the earlier slide how that particular capsid formation is happening, and then the packaging will start, and then the structural protein is going, taking the packaging. After packaging, the maturation is happening, and the virus is released from the cytoplasm. And that is how the complete poliovirus life cycle is happening. That is how the complete picornaviridae life cycle is also happening. So you see, it's a very highly studied, highly organized way of expressing the protein, and it provides you actually the basic model that can be used to study the viral replication. So once we have established the understanding from the previous and the current lecture that how this particular virus, what is the genome, how this particular virus is going for replication, what is the structure that we are talking about. Let us see what is the pathogenesis of this particular genera when we are talking about the enteroviruses. Now, when I'm talking about the enteroviruses, how this pathogenesis is going on, we are talking about the rhino, the coxsackie, the polio, the hepatitis A virus, how it is happening. It is affecting the enteric part, enteric canal, and by viremia entering inside the blood of the circulatory system. That's what we talk about. It can target different tissues. It can target different tissues. It can target the hepatitis A targets the liver. The meninges can be targeted by the coxsackie or the polio virus, thereby causing meningitis. Or when we are talking about crossing the blood-brain barrier, this polio and coxsackie are very easy to cross that barrier, enter inside the central nervous system, and can affect brain. This can be affected by the echo and the coxsackie, both system A and B. It can also affect the heart and the thorax. Whereas when we are talking about the skin, the coxsackie A and the echo viruses are very potently affecting the skin. Or when we are talking about in terms of cattle, typically that we discussed in the last lecture about foot and mouth disease. So you see pathogenesis, how this particular pathogenesis is happening for these particular viruses, and we are talking about specifically the polio viruses. That is the interest virus of this particular lecture. Then polio virus is the name of the virus. The disease is actually what we call in layman language it's polio, but clinically we call it as poliomyelitis. which is a systemic infection, systemic viral infection of this particular poliovirus, which predominantly is affecting your central nervous system, thereby inducing the impairment of the motor neurons and the conduction of the central nervous system activity, inducing and the terminal end induces paralysis. That's why the name came. Polio, polio means gray, and the mylos means marrow. So eventually it is affecting your spinal cord. That's why the name came up as polio. Although using polio is not is a very common name that also we use in the conversation. The shortened form of the name is actually the polio. When we are talking about polio, there are three different serotypes that we talk about, but among those three serotypes, there is no common antigen that we are talking about. So you see, they have the identical physical properties that is based on the sequence similarity, or you should say the homology that these three serotypes are having, and the similarity is very less. It's around 36 to 52%. And humans are the only susceptible host that is being introduced, that is being known for this particular viruses. So epidemiologically, if you say that, based on the epidemiological studies in the past half century, people have people came to realize that it's a very potent pathogen, and multiple nations went on for massive immunization campaign. And this is the classical example how, as a country, one can unite and mount a response against a very dangerous virus. That's what we are doing in case of corona also. So we had already done that. We already have fought a battle with a very potent pathogen called as poliovirus, and we won. The main point is we managed a victory. But still, when we say that we managed the victory, that we have eradicated the poliovirus in most of the regions, still there are certain regions where this particular virus is available or is flourishing, that is Africa. And then again, the agencies are there which are working day and night, working very hard to eradicate that the pathogen from that subcontinent, from that continent, African continent also. So when you see the polio virus, it's a very typical enterprise, that what we have studied, the complete structure. But you see, when you're talking about the polio virus, and if you put it at a temperature sensitive terms, if you put it in a temperature sensitive terms, then when you heat it at 55 degrees Celsius for 30 minutes, when you heat it at 55 degrees Celsius for 30 minutes, they are getting inactivated. They are getting inactivated. But if you have the magnesium ion concentration, that inactivation is not there. That inactivation is not there. That's why when you're going for purified polioviruses, those purified polioviruses are inactivated in chlorine with a concentration of 0.1 parts per million. Now, if you go for much higher concentration of chlorine, the classical example is disinfectant of sewage. See, when you are purifying a particle, you require much less concentration. But when you are talking about inactivating that particular pathogen in a solvent system, and that solvent system you are talking about disinfectant in terms of sewage that or fecal suspensions or other organic matter, we have to use a very high concentration compared to 0.1 parts per million. And polioviruses are not affected by any kind of ether disinfecting or any kind of sodium deoxycholate system, or when we are talking about in their survivability in terms of fecal drainage or sewage drainage or the wastewater drainage, then they survive for days to weeks. They survive for days to weeks, and that is why they pose a very major threat. And because on an additional factor, they are resistant towards the stomach acidity, then that is the reason why the pathogenesis through entry system is very high. So the sporadic cases, when we're talking about cultural poliomyelitis, that goes in the history as early as 1840. In fact, the first description of natural history or the neurological complications that we associate with this particular viruses came in 1890. Then in early 1910, early 1908, the Lensten and Popper demonstrated that this particular poliovirus is actually a filtrable virus. Then eventually in 1953, with all the advancements and technologies that were developed to culture this particular virus, Salk, uh, Salk immunized using the formalin inactivating this particular virus in formalin. He immunized the human subjects and showed that yes, the inactivated virus can be used as a vaccine to fight against this particular pathogen. And this then marks the history. After 1955, there were very advancement in the vaccine development started from 1955 against different viruses. And for this particular viruses also, then SARS gave the inactivated, then came the attenuated part. And today, both the vaccines are very well studied, very well purified, very well manufactured so that their efficiency is very high. So that their efficiency is very high. And based on the trial and the license, this particular SARS vaccine was released in 1955. In 1955, so you see, as early as we are talking about the historical aspects of this particular activity. So when we are talking about this human poliomyelitis, you have to understand the events that is happening from day 0 to day 11. See, it is going in fact in the intestine, then there is invasion by multiplication that enters in the condition of viremia, and by viremia, if the virus is multiplying and entering into different organs, then by the day of the 7th or 8th day, it reaches to the central nervous system where the invasion and multiplication starts, and by the end of the 11th day or the 11th day, there is an onset of paralysis. There is an onset of paralysis, and that is why this virus is so much dangerous. So when we're talking about in terms of vaccine, and I discussed you about the inactivated and formalin inactivated vaccine called as IPV, inactivated polio vaccine, which was developed by Salk, that is Jonas Salk. The other vaccine format that is prevalent is OPV, that is oral polio vaccine that we give. The polio drops that we are talking about in general public, do boon zindagi ki. That's what the slogan has been published in India. So that two drops, what we are talking about, those two drops that we are talking about are of oral polio vaccine, which is again a live attenuated vaccine. A live attenuated vaccine. First, let us, which was developed by Albert Sabin, the great Albert Sabin. Then let's discuss what is oral polio vaccine. Oral polio vaccine is called as Sabin vaccine. It's very effective. It gives you lifelong immunity. In fact, it induces the secondary antibody response also, like the same response that will be generated once a natural infection has happened. It completely mimics the natural infection. So that is why that particular mode of immunization or that particular mode of vaccine is very highly prevalent. Then we have inactivated polio vaccine. Then we have inactivated polio vaccine. Now the major disadvantage with this particular inactivated polio vaccine is there is a lack of secretory antibody. And if you want to have a lifelong immunity with the IPV, you got to go with the booster dose. You got to go with the multiple booster dose. Apart from this, it's the IP is highly stable. There is no point of questioning the stability. The route of administration is again very safe, and there is no risk has been shown in phase 4 trials when we are talking about particular vaccine-related associated disease. There is no risk involved. Now, when we are talking about the oral vaccine, the major disadvantage is you cannot give oral polio vaccine because since it is live attenuated, you cannot give this oral polio vaccine in immunocompromised patients. You cannot give immunocompromised patient a live vaccine. You got to give an inactivated viral inoculum. Inactivated viral inoculum. Secondly, the major difference why people prefer oral drop is that it's very easy. Giving drops to children is much more easier than injecting them with a needle. So that is the difference between IPV and oral vaccine. That is the difference between IPV and oral. So this is about the vaccine, and this is the differentiating part when we're talking about the killed SARC, that is 1953, which was in fact released in 1955, and then subsequently Sabine live attenuated came, which was based on cell culture, the deployed cell culture in 1959, and both of them have been approved, and both of them are still being used for immunizing the children or for going for mass immunization against this particular polio virus. So this is all, students. This is all that we have discussed in the past two lectures. The complete family of Picornaviridae family, that their each and every aspect, along with the pathogenesis and the vaccination that we have discussed. So these are the links for you. These are the links for your understanding, so that when you have the basic understanding, it will be very easy for you all to go ahead. So with this, I thank you so much. I extend my humble thanks to all. Uh, I hope both the lectures and this particular topic of the coronavirus and the coronavirus was fruitful one. And please go through the lectures so that you have a clear-cut understanding of the coronavirus. In my opinion, the family which forms the basic foundation of this virology. So thank you so much. Thank you for your patience listening. We will meet again with another topic in the series of Basics of Biology. Till then, please take care, stay safe, and wish you a very, very happy learning. Thank you so much.